New year, new me. My resolutions are to lose 29 pounds in 30 days, quit smoking, and get out of debt by February. I mean, that's totally doable, right? Wait a minute, stop right there. Why is it that year after year we put these ridiculous expectations on ourselves and then we feel completely defeated when it doesn't happen? Well, we are going to get down to the nitty gritty of the truth of why resolutions don't work and what we can do instead that will ignite us to a more joy-filled version of ourselves for 2023. Welcome to the Power of Investing in People podcast. I am your host, Sha Sparks. I am known to be an energetic catalyst and fearless communicator. Over the past 25 years, I have been asked for my advice on relationships, leadership, and love. And this season is completely dedicated to spark those relationships, the way you lead and the way you love. I am sharing my experience and knowledge and to ignite season 8 on fire. And today we have a special guest, my good friend who just happens to be an amazing health and fitness and lifestyle coach, Emmett Kinsella. Welcome to the show, Emmett.
Hey, Shay, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Yeah, me too. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, we were just talking. I can't believe we've known each other for online for a year and a half, and then had the lovely time to meet you in person where we obviously instantly became best friends after 6 hours of coffee.
Well, yeah, isn't it great? Like 2022 that you can be friends with somebody for such a long time, never have met,
Right.
but you're online with them the whole time. And then all of a sudden you meet and it's like you're instant friends and you're talking for, like you said, 6 hours and then going, oh my gosh, what the heck time is it right now?
Right.
So yeah, totally,
Right.
totally cool. Totally cool.
Yeah. So, I love this discussion about why resolutions don't work. And I am sure you, as a health and fitness and lifestyle coach, get these people all the time that are like, this is what I want, 29 pounds in 30 days. Let's make that happen. Right? Like, that's my resolution.
Yeah,
and you're like, no, let's back that up. Well, so tell us your version of why you think resolutions don't work.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't think resolutions are simply a matter of New Year's. I think people tend to make them throughout the year. I think they have good intentions with them, but oftentimes resolutions come from a place of something they just desire to do or want to do, but they're not necessarily willing to put the action behind it. Which is why, resolutions might be good. They might make you feel good, because at least you're saying it out loud. So you're kind of like putting it out there like, oh yeah, I want to lose weight. Oh yeah, I want to get healthy. Oh yeah, I want to get in better shape. But unless you have a plan in place, unless you have specific goals in place, then your resolution, which I think has been proven for, I don't even know when resolution started, to be honest with you. I would love to do some research to find when the first New Year's resolution, because it's obviously where we're coming up to in a few weeks.
I'm sure it has something to do with Hallmark.
Yes.
Yes, right?
Yes,
it's got to be made up somewhere.
Well, yeah. And so if it's not snowing and you're not in some quaint little village, where there's a beautiful shops and everybody looks really nice, it's like, what's the point of a resolution? But yeah, with New Year's coming up, obviously there's going to be countless people making resolutions. And I don't remember. I remember reading up on the percentage of people that actually follow through with it. And it's pretty dismal.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, I know, I even know people who don't go to the gym for the first 2 months of the year because it's so packed with people who everybody's in there with their New Year's resolution. And then they know by probably mid-February, it's back to where it was, because people just stop. So, resolutions, again, while with good intentions, are more of a wish than anything. I think that's even what it really is. It should be, what do you wish for? And so if it's a wish, then it's going to remain a wish until you apply some goals to it.
I completely agree. In fact, I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I have been that person that has signed up and gone to the gym in January, but I've also learned very quickly that is not for me. And I need to join the gym in March.
Yes,
When it's like
absolutely.
weeds out, it's like, okay, I'm not in part of that crowd. I mean to take this seriously. And it's
Absolutely.
amazing to me to see literally so many people go through this every single year. And they're
Mhm,
like, my resolution is to blank. And I found myself shifting at some point. I couldn't even tell
mhm,
you when. My language around it shifted. And
mhm.
I no longer said, well, my resolutions are. I said, my goals are. This is what
Yes.
my goal for the year is.
Mhm,
And then it even shifted even more, and it went to my intention, what my intention for the year
mm.
is.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
got even more specific, and I don't want to say downplayed, but I really got very specific and in a lane that
Mhm,
is not even, I hadn't even thought of before.
mm,
So I love this conversation because there is something about goals that
mhm.
when we become attached emotionally to them
Yeah.
and we don't achieve them,
Mhm,
then we go through this whole like self-fulfilling prophecy of we didn't do it. That just fires into my I'm not good enough, I'm not smart
mhm,
enough, I'm not
mhm.
whatever enough, and this whole fear cycle of I'm not enough.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's when I really shifted from the goal setting to really more, what is my intention that I'm willing to practice to move
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah.
And so what is something that how do you take your clients through, goal setting versus intentions versus, I know you said you don't really do resolutions. So, when someone comes to you and wants to sign up with you at the beginning
Mhm.
of a year and you're like, I have all these resolutions, what do you say to them?
That's great. But here's what we're going to do instead. And whenever they start the 12-week program that I have, they go through what's called an onboarding stage, which is about a week where they're basically preparing to go into this program. And it kind of introduces them to the program, kind of gives them some nuts and bolts. But one of the things that we do is we talk about goals. And there's actually a short video that I have them watch that talks about the importance of goal setting. But you actually pointed something out that's very important with all my clients, which is I call it peeling back the onion, right? So
Mhm.
most people, what'll happen is they'll
Yes.
say, yes, I want, I have these goals. I'm like, great, what's your goal? And I even have them write it down, send it to me, and we address it on our first coaching call. And that's usually our first coaching call. Our first coaching call is all about their goals. Oftentimes, what people do is they'll put down on a piece of paper, my goal is to lose 20 pounds, right?
Mhm.
Or my goal is to get in better shape or reverse, so I specialize in intermittent fasting, right? So to reverse like insulin resistance or whatever, right? And then what I do is I get on the phone with them and I say, okay, now why is that important? And they'll say, well, I want to lose the weight because, it's going to help my confidence. Okay, well, why is that important? Why is it important to have confidence? And they'll say, well, because then I feel better and, going out in public, I'm not as okay. And so why is that important? And you keep asking why. And
Yeah.
almost every single time it comes back to either family,
Mm.
a lot of mothers, for instance, will say, well, I really want my kids to see me actually accomplish this so I can show them what they can really do if they put their mind to something, and then that's when I go, exactly. That's your goal. I said, yes, your goal, on a surface level is to lose that weight. Awesome. But you know what? At some point, you're going to lose the weight. At some point, you're going to reverse the insulin resistance. At some point, you're going to be healthy. What is going to keep you moving forward at that point? And if you don't have an emotional attachment to that goal, if you don't have that emotional why, you're going to stop. And I know I've done that too in years past where I wanted to, of course, when you're young and you're in your 20s, I mean, like, oh, I want to get in shape. I might be dating myself a little bit, but I want that Baywatch body, right? And
Yes.
it's like, you want to go to the pool and, it's like you want a little ego, you want a little bit of that,
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, yeah, you're in good shape. But then what happens is you get there, and then what?
Mm.
It's like it's kind of it dies at that point.
Yeah.
And I would notice that I wasn't as intentional with my workouts, I wasn't as intentional with my eating, I wasn't as intentional with my sleep, and because I had already quote unquote arrived, if you will.
Right.
And
Right.
so by attaching that emotional why to it, now it's like, well, no, I'm not going to stop now because if I'm trying to prove something to my kids, or if I'm trying to be an example to other people because we have a serious health crisis in this country, then I'm going to continue moving forward because it's not about me. And I think that's the thing. The goal eventually can't be only about you, because if it's only about you, you're eventually going to get to that point where you're just going to say, all right, I've made it. It's good. And then that's when things start to slow down. And a lot of times that's when you start reverting backwards and you start going back to where you were. So that's kind of what I take clients on early on. Obviously it's important to always affirm, what it is that they're talking about, because that's how they see their goals. That's what's important to them. And so then it's my job to kind of open up and expand their understanding of what goals are and why they're so important and why they're needed, so I have them write them down, because it's a proven fact that goals that are written down are you're more likely to attain them if they're actually written down. I also tell them to put them places where they can see those goals so that they're always reminded of them. And so, for instance, to that mother who might be having a rough day because she's kind of putting a lot of pressure on herself, she may be messed up for a couple days, and it's like, okay, you got to show yourself grace. But at the same time, remember why you're doing this. This isn't just about you. This is about your kids. This is about your husband. This is about not being, 60 years old in a walker because you haven't taken care of yourself, or putting so much pressure on your children as you do get older because you have so many chronic health issues that they need to now take care of you when they really shouldn't have to at the, being 60, 65 years old, so those are all little things that I work with clients with, but goals are a huge, and it's something I remind them with as the program continues. So yeah, goals are absolutely huge. Resolutions are a good start. They're a good starting point, but we eventually got to get to goals, and then we got to get to that emotional why.
So I'll share mine if you share
Yeah,
yours. What's
absolutely.
your why?
What's my why?
Yeah.
Well, so for health and fitness I kind of mentioned it. There is a significant health crisis in this country. There was a study done by, I believe, UNC Chapel Hill back in 2018 that basically addressed metabolic health. Okay. And don't want to butcher it, but metabolic health is 5 factors. And it talks about insulin, I believe, insulin resistance, blood pressure, triglycerides, waist circumference, I believe. And there's one other. Well, anyway, these are five factors that contribute to metabolic health. So they did a study and they concluded, and what metabolic health is basically that you're of optimal health and not on any sort of prescription medication, right? Mm-hmm. So your body is able to function the way it was designed to function. When they did the study, they were floored at the results. It came back that 12% of the population is actually considered metabolically healthy. Being unmetabolic,
only 12%. Yes.
Only. So
wow.
Being metabolically unhealthy leads to all sorts of chronic illnesses. I mean, it's a laundry list of chronic illnesses. And what happens? You get these chronic illnesses, you go to the doctor, they put you on prescription medication. Mm-hmm. That prescription medication, why it might address the one thing you're dealing with and put a Band-Aid over the problem, it creates other issues and never actually heals you. So that is one of many reasons why, there's such a health crisis in this country. And a little bit, kind of things that I've gone through. I think I mentioned when we met that I had COVID back in 2021. I was in the hospital for 5 days. And it was the first time ever in my life that coming out of it, I couldn't physically do the things that I used to be able to do without a problem. I mean, even if you get an injury, you heal from the injury, but this was something that was so different. I dealt with the fatigue, I dealt with the brain fog, I dealt with cardiac issues for a period of time. And I literally got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I'll ever get back to where I was. Wow. And just through consistent and persistent effort, intermittent fasting, eating a clean and healthy diet, doing what I could physically, and then building upon that over time, getting good enough sleep, all of a sudden, I found myself actually better than I was prior to getting COVID. Wow. And it kind of was like a bell went off in my head. And I was like, you know what? There are people out there. And also to backtrack a little bit, I'm convinced I got COVID because prior to that, I wasn't taking care of myself very well. I wasn't getting the exercise. I wasn't eating as well. I was still fasting, but I wasn't really as intentional with everything. So I'm convinced my immune system was pretty shot at that point, came in contact with it, got it, ended up in the hospital, pretty scary when I went in there. But when I came out, it kind of started to open my eyes to the whole, we have a major health crisis in this country. And it not only is affecting the healthcare industry, but it's a domino effect. I mean, they came out recently, the military did, and said that they cannot find recruits that are able to pass the minimum requirements because they're all basically fat and unhealthy, is what their language was. And so this is not just an issue of healthcare. This is a defense issue. This, let's consider how people are affected mentally and emotionally from their health. I mean, processed food really affects the neurotransmitters in your brain. I mean, there's people walking around on all sorts of medication, kids especially, when the real issue is simply the food that they're eating. The processed food, the sugar, the refined carbs, everything that is contributing to all this. So you ask like what my why is, if you will, and what my goals are. My why is to address and somehow do my part to kind of combat this growing health crisis, but also provide a simple, effective, and maintainable way to go about it. There's a lot of information out there on health and wellness, and it can get very confusing. It can seem overwhelming, and it leads people in that analysis paralysis where they just don't know what to do. And so I want to provide something that, again, is simple, effective, and maintainable that people can apply. They can realize how simple it is to live a healthy and fit lifestyle and the amazing benefits you get from it, and share that message with as many people as possible and create kind of that exponential growth, if you will, where then they go through the program, they then share it with other people, so that it just creates this domino effect where more and more people, and if somehow we can change that 12% to even 15% or even 20%, it would have a significant impact on our country. And so that's kind of the emotional why behind what I'm doing. I get very, very some a little too passionate when I talk to people about it because they're not in the same mindset as I am. And so it can really be like, whoa, this guy is really into this stuff. And it's like, you don't understand, like, this is so important, because, and just one more thing too, like I'm 42 now. So I'm of the age where aunts and uncles are now in their 70s and 80s. And I'm seeing the unfortunate circumstances that family members are being put in simply because they just didn't take care of themselves. And it's not to say you got to be Mr. Olympia or Miss Fitness USA. If you just simply make some simple changes, change some habits, and create some behaviors, you can drastically change your health, not just now, but in the future. And it will not only impact you, but it'll impact everybody around you too. So it's probably a much longer answer, but at the same time, it's still, like I said, I'm very passionate about this. And my goal is to get that message of health and fitness by unlocking the power of intermittent fasting to as many people as possible.
I love your answer. And the key word that I want everyone to really hear is that you said the word heal. You are a healer. And I think people who are coaches are healers. And I that's what I do, is I heal. And the reason my why is because I healed. You healed, right? And now you want to help others heal because you saw something that you had never seen before in yourself and in others. And you're like, oh yeah, I need to be able to share what I've learned. And that's really part of what this podcast series is about, what the podcast that I do, the coaching that I do, the speaking, the books, all the things that I do is because I invested in myself. I started to heal. And then the conversations that I had with myself changed. And then that overflowed onto the conversations I had with others, my family, my clients, everything shifted. And for me, I went from my dad not being able to, we talked about the weather and how my car was running. And that was the two things that we pretty much only talked about. Maybe football, but barely, right? It was mostly about the car and weather. We had deep dive conversations where in the last 6 months of his life, he shared with me about how he was drafted to Korea. And I didn't know any of that until that time. And I look back, he's gone now. And I look back and I'm like, he and I really shifted to where he became my best friend in the last 5 years of his life. And we not only healed our relationship, but I was able, because I changed the way I spoke to him, I also changed the way I spoke to everyone. My brothers were able to heal their relationships with him. He went to my mom, and they had been divorced for almost 30, 25, 26 years. And she was, had terminal cancer, and was thanking her for the job that she did with us because he wasn't there.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, yeah. And I'm like, if this can happen to my family, if this can happen to me, then I want you and everyone to have these tools and skills and awareness to be able to show up in their life as the leader that they were designed to be, and be able to have these fruitful and fulfilling and wonderful relationships with their team or their spouse or their children or even their parents, and be able to show up in a way that is fearless rather than full of fear of not willing or able or have the tools to say what it is they really mean. Instead, they hide it in other things. They hide it in sarcasm, or they might drink, and instead of actually having a conversation, they stuff it down with food. And I used to be that person. Instead of telling someone how I actually felt or what was going on with me, I would come home from school. I realized this about 20 years ago. I started journaling for the first time.
Okay.
And for the first time I sat down, I literally was like, I don't know what I want to write. This is stupid, blah, 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 but I'm going to keep going. I mean, literally the thoughts, it was a brain dump. A brain dump is what I call it. It's a great
start. Yeah.
And that's literally what I did. I just wrote down like whatever was showing up in my head. I wrote it down. And as I kept writing in the one sitting, as I kept writing, I realized this story came up about, oh yeah, remember when you were in 6th grade and you had to go to the board? And I felt in my mind's eye of myself, I had this image that I was larger than I really was, appeared larger than I really was, right? That I couldn't make it down the path of the desks, and that I was going to knock everything over with my hips on the way down from books to Kleenex, right? And by the time I'm at the board and I'm doing the problem, I am sweating profusely. I'm having I didn't know that I was having a panic attack in 6th grade, in middle school age, right?
Wow.
But that's what I discovered in that first writing of the journal. And then I went to, oh my God. And then I go home, and instead of expressing what I went through and ask for help, I just went home and shoved whatever food that was in front of me. And to make things worse, my mom, I learned this term later. My mom was what's called a feeder.
Okay. Yeah.
So in compulsive eaters, or what is it called? Codependent relationships. There's a person who's an eater, and there's a person who's a feeder who actually feeds you. So instead of having the conversation, she's enabling me.
Yep.
Instead of equipping me with counseling or equipping me with other tools, because she didn't have those tools. She didn't understand. She was enabled her whole life. And now here she is in her prime of her life, and she's just repeating the pattern of what she did as a child, of what her mom did. And it was like, oh my gosh, wow. And that first time I sat down journaling, I was like, oh my God. And when the food no longer served me, when I was probably like 13, 14, probably more 14, 15, I started drinking. And then I was shoving alcohol down my throat as fast as possible, and to hide those feelings. And I think that's the interesting thing about with food. And food is so different than alcohol. Food, you cannot cut out. Alcohol, you can cut out completely.
Well, and food's accepted.
Yes.
Food is accepted. It's something you use to, and alcohol too, but we know alcohol to be cause a lot of issues, like quickly. right? There can be an immediate effect from alcohol. You can get in your car and kill somebody. You can find yourself passed out behind a dumpster. Like there's immediate things that we see with alcohol, whereas food, it's a little different, and so therefore it's more accepted. And of course, if it tastes good, you enjoy it, other people partake with you, so food is a very different thing altogether. And is not, people are starting to wake up a little bit more to it now. I'd say over the past 10 years, especially the healing power of food. You hear that a lot now.
Yes,
Food
yes.
is medicine.
Yes.
Thank goodness that's starting to happen. You're starting to see a lot more people open up about it. But something you kind of touched upon it a little bit, and you talked about healing and then helping other people to heal. Something that I always keep in the back of my head whenever I'm engaging with somebody is, I think was it Maya Angelou? People don't care what you do, they care about how you treat them, or something to that effect. I think she said that. But a lot of times it simply takes a person to show that they care. And it takes because people are, we live in a very dark world right now. We live in a world where people are struggling more than ever. People have very little hope as to what's going to come around the bend, what the future holds. And so now more than ever, we need people like you to be able to be willing to kind of step into that battle zone, if you will, where people are suffering silently. They're just accepting things as they are, and be willing to say, hey, talk to me, like what's going on, what's real, because the thing that I don't necessarily advertise with my program, because a lot of times people don't know it until it starts to happen. But of course, when people get involved in some type of health and fitness program, the first thing is lose weight. They want to lose weight, they want to look better, right? But the reason they haven't gotten to that point yet is because there's something going on internally that they have not overcome yet. And so they literally sabotage any effort that they try to do, or they simply think they're not good enough, or this is just how it is. Like one of the things I can't stand is when people say, oh, I'm putting weight on and, whatever. But that's what happens when you get older. And I'm like, have you looked at movies from the 40s and 50s? Because all of them look pretty lean, in pretty good shape for the most part. Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily true, or if that's just something we've been taught to say so that we don't necessarily have any sort of desire to do anything about it. We just accept it as what it is. And so I think the thing is like, one of the things that I know when we met that I loved what you're doing is you're taking your experiences and the things that you've done and been through, the hard things. One, you're willing to be transparent about it, which we need more people to do. And two, you're willing to actually go up to that person and say, hey, how are things going? And when they give you that, like, oh, great, you look at them and go, no, how are things going? Like, how are you doing? Are you okay? And it's amazing how once you show you care, people go, actually, no. And it's amazing when that wall comes down, because people have walls up big time. They wear masks and they try to hide what's going on, and it's just a matter of, you want to be there to listen, you want to be able to allow them to vent, you want to be allowed to share their frustration, but then you want to have the ability to say, okay, now what can we do to reverse this or change this, get you on a new path, change course, so that what was will no longer be, and what's to come will be even better. So it's like, that's what I think. So for instance, like in your story, was there a moment where you saw somebody, or somebody took the time for you to say, hey, let's talk, like what's going on?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So no one actually ever said, let's talk. In fact, I think about that often with my parents, like, hello, their teenage daughter was an alcoholic and had gotten a DUI, had to go through mandatory AA. Why didn't they ever question, like, what's going on? They never asked that because they had their shit that they were,
I was just gonna, yes,
you know, they
absolutely.
had their stuff that they were going through, that because they were getting ready to get a divorce. And, you know, and I don't blame them in any way, shape or form. It's just, that's how it was. And I want to say something. Thank you so much for saying that I'm transparent. It's because I learned to be.
Yes.
So when I was around that same age, 6th grade type of age, or that whole anxiety type thing, I had someone attempt to rape me. And I truly believe that because of that incident, that I fed myself to protect myself, right? And a lot of times women, we do that to add extra weight so we aren't looked upon as a sexual being anymore, or quote unquote a target.
Or the opposite.
Yes.
They see themselves as one, and so then they present themselves as, because that's how they feel they get attention. So yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I had this thought in my head that I used the word compulsive eating. One of my friends had said she had went through weight loss surgery, and she had to go through the I think it's Overeaters Anonymous, compulsive eating, some sort of like that type of training first before she had the weight loss surgery. And she was telling me a couple of things about it. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, do you have that? And I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm such a compulsive, like I'm an overeater, like this is it. And it literally wasn't until almost 20 years later that I actually went to a weight loss doctor myself. And first of all, he looked at me, right. And he looked at me and he's like, why are you here? First of all. Second of all, he was like, you're not a compulsive eater. And I go, how do you know? And he said, when you go through a fast food, what do you order? And I'm like, I get a number, whatever, from a whatever fast food. I get a number, whatever. And he goes, and how many do you get? I'm like, how many? I get one. And then where do you go after that? And I'm like, home. So wait a minute, you don't go to another fast food place. I'm like, why would I go to another fast food place? Because that's what compulsive eaters and overeaters do. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like my mindset, I had it totally shifted just by having that conversation with that doctor. I did nothing else with him, but I needed that confirmation and that permission to let go of that story that I was telling myself that, oh, I'm just an overeater. I'm just a compulsive eater. I can't figure out why my emotions are out of this, that I can't control myself. That wasn't the truth at all. It was the lie that I had been listening to, that I had been believing about myself. And that is what brings everything full circle, is the lie that we listen to, one about relationships, about leadership, and about love. It has nothing to do with the lie. It has everything to do about how we decide to change that lie.
And believe it or not.
It goes back to mindset, right? And not only does it, how we show up then shifts, but it goes back to then resolutions. Our goals then start to shift, and our why starts to shift, right? And then the momentum goes, oh, okay, so we go here now, rather than, oh, I thought I was on this track. And so like, obviously we talked for 6 hours when we met. There's so much to talk about around this that we forget as society that we have a choice on how we want to show up, on how, you mentioned it being intentional, how intentional we want to be on the water that we drink, the moves that we make every day. How much are we moving every day? How much are we eating? How much are we not eating? I've even had a nutritionist tell me one time, you know, Shay, you're not actually eating enough.
That's very common.
And
Very common.
again, was blown away because my mom had started me on a diet at that 6th grade year. And, you know, this is the calorie deficit. That's it. No more. And I spent years doing that. And again, I started to have the panic attacks when I started to realize there was too many calories on my plate. And it was like, oh yeah, none of that. None of that was happening.
Eat less and move more. Doesn't work. It doesn't. They've proven it, actually. It doesn't
I
work.
know.
So yeah.
But it's that mindset shift, right? That
Yes.
you have to get out of.
Yeah. And it's funny you said
Yeah.
that, because one of the things that I tell clients very early in the program is, I'm like, listen, this is going to require a mindset shift, just like you said, because there are certain things you've been fed over the years that you just believe to be truth, just because that's all you've heard. You're going to hear things in this program that you may not either have heard or even agree with, based on the things that you've been told for so many years. But if you just listen to me, if you just follow the way this thing's mapped out, you're going to be very surprised. Like, take intermittent fasting, for instance. Well, how could you possibly, lose weight, get in great shape, maintain muscle, if not put on muscle, by not eating? And it actually happens. It actually, because human growth hormone increases with intermittent fasting, and so there's certain things that happen in the body that actually promote muscle growth. And so it's like, but again, or take, for instance, healthy fats. Fats have been demonized since probably one of the videos that I do with people in the program is I kind of go over a little bit of the history, just a little bit of where this whole anti-fat movement came from, back in the 40s, then into the 50s with cardiac patients. And then it started to become, a little more mainstream in the 60s. Then in the 70s, it's like you had the health and fitness industry, the government all of a sudden got involved, which is never a good thing. And then,
Right.
and then you had the medical professional, they all came together, and they even changed the dietary guidelines in the government to all of a sudden show health, fat is bad. And so then we, as the masses, just went, oh, okay, yeah, fat's bad, fat's bad. So we cut fat out of our diet completely. And now we have all these chronic health issues that have come 30, 40 years later. And so it's a mindset shift. Like I always say, you don't know what you don't know because you don't know it.
Yep.
And so unless you're willing to actually open yourself up, and you spoke to the whole truth and lies thing, the hard thing is for people sometimes is there's one truth and there's hundreds or thousands of lies.
Lies, yes.
And so it's almost like, I remember the movie Catch Me If You Can?
Yes.
Frank Abagnale, I think his name was, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So funny thing about that movie, it's one of the few movies that the real life story is crazier than the actual movie.
Right.
I was reading up about it, and they said the movie did not do this guy's life justice. Like, the stuff he did is just beyond, right? Well, after he got out of prison, I guess the FBI hired him to basically help people, like, with fraud, money fraud, and things like that. And they asked him, with all the different counterfeit currencies out there and all this sort of, like, how do you teach these people to be able to spot them? He goes, well, I don't spend a lot of time on the counterfeits. He goes, what I do is I teach them about the real thing, so that they know the real thing inside and out. So the moment a counterfeit comes around, they can spot it a mile away. And I was like, that's brilliant. Because what we do oftentimes is we try to pick out all that, well, is this a lie? Is this a lie? Why not just focus on what is the truth? And then naturally you'll reject the lies, because it won't line up with what the truth says. And so, when it comes to anything in life, I think that's very true, because lies, I mean, they overpromise and underdeliver all the time. And so it's like they sound good at first, they sound like they make sense, you start to do it, and then you recognize this isn't turning out the way that I hoped or wanted to. What's going on? And it has a domino effect. It starts to affect your mental side. It starts to affect you emotionally, your confidence, your self-esteem. So it's so important to understand what the truth is, to be able to reject those lies. And like you said, that is something that in my program, again, I don't really advertise it so much, but I spend probably more time dealing with the emotional and mental side of things than I do really with the physical component, because the physical component is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of, it's not difficult to do. It's that mental and emotional state that people are in from years and years of what they consider failure that has just compounded over time, where they literally don't think they can do it. And the reality is once they start setting goals, and they don't have to be these enormous goals. That's another thing too, that I'm very adamant. I'm like, there is this mentality out there, like, oh, make a goal so big that it's just going to stretch you. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But also too, like if you come to me and say, hey, Emmett, in the next 12 weeks, I want to lose 150 pounds. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm all about stretching yourself, but I'm also not about setting yourself up to fail. And I can guarantee you that you are setting yourself up to fail, and you're going to be disappointed because you are not losing 150 pounds in 12 weeks. So I teach them, I want you to kind of go a little bit past your comfort zone. So if you're thinking, oh, 10 pounds, I can lose that. Okay, let's make it 15 then. Just a little bit more. And then as time goes on, let's say you start to lose that weight a little faster because everybody's body's different. Well, then goals are fluid. You can change them. You don't have, it's not like you set a goal and you're sitting there going, oh no, oh no, oh no. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? If you recognize like, hey, this goal is a little too easy. All right, let's bump it up then. We can readjust that. We can readdress that halfway through the program if you want to, but making sure that those goals, because as you start to accomplish your goals little by little, it actually does amazing things for your self-confidence and your self-esteem. Because simply just saying like, hey, I'm going to go and accomplish this. Okay, great. Then you go accomplish it. Now you're convincing yourself subconsciously that you can do it. And then you build on that. And then the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that before too, where maybe if you look back as to those goals you had when you first kind of started your journey, you probably look back. I know I do, where I'm kind of like, that's kind of an easy goal. Like I can't, but it was kind of a starting off point. And what it did more so is not so much the results were more mental. They were more a matter of improving my own confidence and self-esteem and self-worth to believe like, well, if I can do that, then I can do the next one. And then I can do the next one. And then before you know it, 10 years goes by and you're going, whoa, like this has been an amazing journey so far, so I don't know if you have a similar experience with that.
Well, yeah, I think it all comes down for me is self-worth. Literally everything comes down to self-worth. And I didn't realize how I didn't have any. I mean, I think people are like, oh, you had low self-esteem. No, I think it was more than that. I think I had no self-worth, not just low self-esteem. I literally think I had no self-worth.
That was a negative.
Right. Like I was depleted of anything. And I say that jokingly, but truthfully, I look back, I mean, the depression that I felt as a kid, I can remember thinking, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't know. I'm ignored. I'm not nurtured. I'm just a person in this house that exists. And I didn't really feel like I had a contribution to my family. And now think about that. Think about that on a spiritual concept, as well as I want to talk about discernment. So make sure I circle back around to that, because you said something earlier that really made me think about that. So think about this as a child. First of all, our childhood experiences shape our adult decisions. Number one,
100%.
All the time. And as a child, I literally thought I didn't have a contribution to my family. And yet, how many years later, what happened? I healed, and the entire family healed because I healed. So if you're listening, you're watching, the audience, I just want you to understand that maybe you're the one that has to do the work to heal so that your relationship with your family will improve.
100%.
And you said the word about believing the lies. And I just want to say that for years, I believed the lies. And then I went to God. I'm a very prayerful person. I know you have a walk as well. You're a believer as well. And so if it's universe, feel free to talk to the universe, whatever that looks like for you. But for me, it's like, I literally would go to God in prayer and be like, God, is this true about me? Like, is that really what's happening? When I was writing that journal and I was like, oh my gosh, was I really that big? And I was knocking off the books and like, no, first of all, the space is narrow. Think about that. Change the way you're looking, the lens you're looking at this. And the thing I love about my relationship, and I'm sure you can say the same thing, is that God sees us through the lens of love.
Mm-hmm.
And there is absolutely nothing that we could do or look like that he wouldn't love and accept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is where my worth started to shift, is that I went, okay, if God loves me in this package, then why can't I love me in this package? Because I know I used to think no one loves me because of this package.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so not true.
No.
And it's so not true. And I had to really not just reframe, but I had to relearn
Mm-hmm.
how that inner negative voice spoke to me was a lie. And I had to call it out every single time I heard it and said, that's a lie. What is true?
Mm-hmm.
And really focused on doing that, which is not easy because you're literally holding your thoughts captive. You are literally able to listen in to the discerning voice, right, of God, who's saying, no, my child, that is not who you are. Let me tell you who you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it comes down to identity.
Yes.
I think that's a word that I've noticed coming up in a lot of conversations with people.
Yes.
If your identity is in other people or the world, or what the world can get you, if your identity is in your accomplishments, if your identity is in the car you drive, the house you live in, how good your kids are and all that sort of stuff, those things will all fail you at some point. And so it's important to have your identity in the one who will never fail you, no matter what. And so, yes, like you said, I became a Christian at 25, and it completely changed my life. I mean, it's funny. I've even told people, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were talking, when I look back before 25, I can remember things that I did, but I really can't tell you the emotions I was feeling in those moments. And so,
Right.
and it's strange because, I talk to anybody else and they remember like, oh yeah, I remember I was 15, I was doing this. Oh, I was so scared. I don't remember. I really don't. And so that whole being born again, it's true. Like you really are you are a new person. And so that for me began a very long journey, which continues to today, where there was immediate things that changed. And then there have been things that have been an ongoing process. But it all comes back to identity. Where do you put your identity in? And that then leads to self-worth. It leads to do you have your confidence in you, or is your confidence in him? Because if your confidence is in you, you're setting yourself up for a rough ride. But if your confidence is in him, believing him, his truth, then, which is the truth, then he'll never fail you, no matter what happens in your life. Romans 8:28, God works all things out for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. It's like it will all work out no matter what. But it comes back down to identity. If you don't have your identity steeped in him, then your identity is in quicksand. It's not on some sturdy rock at all. And so, everything that I do today really stems from that. That's really what it is. It's helping people become the best version of themselves and who they were created to be, because we need more people to do that. We need more people to step into who God created them to be, because there are, again, like I go back to that whole, like there are people hurting, there are people struggling, there are even people who look like they have it all together. Sometimes they're the ones who are struggling the most because they're trying to put an image on, they're trying to play the part, and it's like, I personally believe that taking control of your health and fitness is an absolute necessity to be able to, like I was talking to a client recently, and they were saying that, like, we never talked about this, but she was even saying how she just wants everything God has for her. And she realizes that her failure to take care of her health and wellness has impeded that significantly. And I
Wow.
said, it's interesting because in scripture, Paul even says how, physical training is of importance, but obviously spiritual training is of greater importance. I said, here's the thing though. Paul didn't live today. He didn't live in a society where we have copious amounts of sugar, which is a drug. I mean, it's proven to be a drug,
Yes.
right? The
Yes.
dopamine
Yes.
effect in your brain and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of processed foods that, like I mentioned earlier, literally control the neurotransmitters in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Refined carbohydrates that do all sorts of other and are predominantly in processed foods. He didn't have that. So I kind of think if Paul was around today, he would have said, okay, physical training is pretty stinking important, guys. Still not as important as the spiritual, but hey, listen, if you want to be used by God the way that you can be used by him, well, if you can't get out of your chair, if you get tired walking down the street, if you yourself suffer from a lack of confidence and self-worth, well, that's going to impede on your ability to be used by him. And so let's get the health and fitness side component work, where it can be used effectively. And now think about the ways he can use you. It's not a prerequisite, but it's going to make things a lot easier for you if you simply take control of your health and fitness. So I think that's a huge component to just your journey, that God has you on.
Amen. Clearly we're having church up in here.
I know, right?
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I kind of want to, just kind of end on this for a minute and really just say how, all of this that we've been talking about is a healing journey.
Mhm.
And one of my clients today said, when is it over? When is the healing journey over? And I said, when you're dead.
Yeah,
And
not this side of heaven.
he laughed and he was like, what? And I go, seriously, healing is a journey. It is not a destination. And the great thing is that it starts with making that conscious decision. It allows you to stop the autopilot, to put the wrench in the cog, if you will, and go, wait a minute, I need to make some different changes.
Intentional.
Very intentional. And it starts with literally that. And I love what you said earlier, something about there's this whole, I don't know what I don't know what I don't know. That's where I start. What is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to move forward? So if our audience, if you're thinking, well, I don't know where to start in health and wellness and fitness and lifestyle, Emmett, please tell them how you how they can connect with you.
Well, it's pretty simple. So the best way to connect with me is through Facebook. They can just flat out friend request me if they want. Emmett Kinsella. There's not many of us out there. So which is great. So which is probably something you experienced too. I remember my dad saying, you're very fortunate to have a unique name because people always remember you. You're not a John, you're not a Mike, you're not a whatever, Jeff or something. Like people go, oh, Emmett? Oh yeah, absolutely. So Emmett Kinsella, or they can check out the FIT360 lifestyle group page. It is a private page, but they can just ask to be invited in. And of course, I'll let them in. Unless you're a brand new person to Facebook, literally a day old, and you have one friend and you're from some foreign country, maybe I'll be a little bit cautious at that point.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't trust you, but you have to be careful because in the group, I do want people to feel somewhat safe in the group. So that and the focus obviously is sharing the message of health and fitness through the power of intermittent fasting, tips, all sorts of stuff that I offer. Obviously, it's a great way to connect with me too through Messenger. If anybody's interested in the program, we can talk about that too. So FIT360 lifestyle group page is probably the best way to reach me, or just friend request me on Facebook.
Well, thank you for taking your time, for being here, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your energy with us. Because I just obviously, like we said, we could talk for another 6 hours. We just have such great energy together.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I love about you is that you engage.
Mm.
So I know our audience, you are listening and you're like, okay, but I mean, he's just one of those people that are, a coach, but they don't really talk back. And no, he will send him a message. He will literally answer you, just like
Yes.
I get messages all the time and I will answer you as well. And, if anything, we can always get on a call and, right. Like that's what happens.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Emmett, for being here. You're just such a joy and a gem to be around.
Awesome. I had a great time. Thank you for having me. This was fun. Should do it again sometime.
Oh, I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. And maybe I'll be on yours at some point.
Yeah.
Hint, 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 hint. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So if this episode resonates with you, I invite you to join my Spark Your Alpha community for bonus episodes, which really, they're a masterclass. Let's be honest. And they are full of tools to set your alpha skills on fire at shasparks.com. And remember, together we light up this world. So let's get fired up.